How's it going, guys, and welcome back. Today we're going to go through my third favorite build, which I don't use as much because the fire's pretty strong, but which is going to be the Furious Bandit set. But as always, my content is unscripted. I do have a couple notes here just so don't forget anything and have a good flow to it. But so I will try my best, if it gets a little long-winded, to post the chapters down below. But other than that, let's get into it. So, for gear here, we're using the Furious Bandit set. We're going to use the full 6-piece bonus with a jar. And then we're going to be complementing it with a 3-piece Unending Tragedy set. So from the top, we're going to be going with our weapon, the Furious Bandit dual wield. Now this is really important because once you get to and as you progress throughout the campaign, I would recommend using your upgrade resources to get this as high of a tier as you can, because Gust Perfection and Gust Crack are really, really strong with this set. So I'll go over that very briefly. Gust Perfection gives you a 3rd activation of Gust, and then Gust Crack puts a debuff on the enemy, basically allowing you to do additional damage. I go over that a little more in depth in my Gust video, so I'm going to kind of leave that there, just kind of surface level, and we can carry on with the build. So you want this to be as high tier as you can to get at least those 2 skills, or to get those 2 skills, but minimum you do want Gust Perfection, which is the first, which comes first with the epic variant, because Gust Perfection is that 3rd activation, and you want that minimum. Moving on down, we have our jar, and then we have our Furious Bandit pieces. Now I will say, having these in Legendary is nice, but really not necessary. You can tell they do give some nice bonuses, right? Charged attack gives you extra fire damage, which you will be using charged attacks a lot with this build. And then you have, on the gloves, you have extra gust damage and enrage damage. On the pants, more charged attack damage. Furious Bandit boots, you have more gust damage. So gust is really good with this, again with that 3rd activation and Gust Crack from your weapon. But mainly with this, because you're going to be using a lot of charged attacks, you do use aggressive action quite a bit with this build. So really briefly, I'm just going to go down the set bonuses, right? So we have Brink Dodge, which if we're using Howling Blade, we're going to be Brink Dodging a lot, right? So we're going to be getting up, we're going to always have up 15% stamina damage, which is nice because we want to exhaust our enemies to get the extra multiplier of damage, not only for an exhausted enemy, but for Gust. So next one down, we have Charged Attack, damage increase 20%. Again, we're going to be using Outrage, which is the sprinting potent blow, and we're going to be using aggressive action a lot with this build. So having that 20% is going to be really nice, and that would also apply to Dragon Slayer too. The 4-piece, a charged attack grants fire attributes for 10 seconds. Now, 10 seconds isn't that generous, but because of the amount of charged attacks that we have in the dual wield moveset, 10 seconds is more than enough. And I actually overuse them in these 2 fights that I have with Reese and Gwydo, just to show you not only, again, the attacks are strong themselves, but just to refresh that fire when I want to do an extended combo. The 5-piece, we have Enraged, damage multiplier increase, which is 15%. Now, Enraged is when your stamina is below 50%, which is important, so keep that in mind when we go into the jewelry pieces. It's going to come into play. And then the 6-piece, which is also very, very strong, is Enemy Exhausted, damage increase for 20%. So we do 20% extra damage to exhausted enemies. Now, this is huge, especially when we have Gust to go along with that. So real quick before we go to the jewelry pieces, why this is so important is Gust by itself, I won't go over the skill in its entirety, but the more points you put in the Gust skill, you can see down there at the bottom, further increased damage dealt to exhausted enemies. So we have that damage multiplier on the skill itself, but then we also have a third activation with Gust Perfection for an additional attack with that multiplier. And then again with the 6 piece, we get an extra 20% damage to exhausted enemies. So really every time the enemy is exhausted, you really want to get a full Gust activation in there, right? All 3 if you can. So that's mostly, that's just the kind of broad overview of the set itself. Moving on down to the jewelry, we have, what I chose to do is I really like having the 3-piece, because again, I have the jar, the 3-piece Unending Tragedy set. And the reason why is because I get 15% composed damage, right? So on the top half of my stamina bar, so composed is 50% stamina or more, so I'm getting 15% there. Because remember, with my Furious Bandit set, I'm getting 15% when it's 50% or below. And then again, I get, you know, a little bit here and there from my other gear pieces because it has the extra 5 enraged. But I'm getting composed from the 2-piece here and an extra 5 on each. So each jewelry piece gives me 5 from the fixed attributes, and then it gives me 15 from the set itself. So I'm sitting at a nice 25% there. And then the 3-piece gives me, for when we attack, right, goes up to 20 stacks, 1.5% stamina recovery rate. So the reason why this is so nice is because I do get, again, I get a damage benefit when I'm composed, but I get more of a benefit when I'm enraged. So when my stamina becomes 50% or below, I'm really in the sweet spot for dealing damage. Now, I want to stay in that range as long as I can. So when my stamina, right, I'm doing attacks, I'm fighting my enemy. When I get to 50% or below, if I can get there, right? And then if I use a spirit skill, right, because when we use our spirit skills, we generate stamina. I can have that increased duration to give me more stamina and keep me in that range. So when I really need to regen, I use a spirit skill, right? Let that regen kick in, but then it keeps me in that range. So if I really get far down on my stamina, I don't want to get depleted. That recovery will help me get back in the fight faster with the stamina that I need. So that's my main logic around having these 2 pieces with the 3-piece bonus with the jar. There's really nothing else, there's nothing else that's really that I chose these for, right? I get the composed damage, but I get the recovery rate. It's the most important for me. So that's the build as a whole. Again, pretty simple, but the jar is a nice touch. Now, you will need to alter your playstyle a little bit. Again, this is very charged attack focused, right? So you do use outrage a lot, right? To begin, probably to begin the fight mostly, or to start an attack on an exhausted enemy, or to close the distance, right? But what I use very frequently is aggressive action. Now I do have a video on aggressive action, so I won't get too far into the skill, but I'll just say that it's very beneficial to know that the neutral dash and aggressive action is very strong together, and you can gauge that distance. So if I want to get out of the fight and then back in immediately, I can, right? So I can neutral dash, immediately aggressive action, or I can get to the full extent of my dodge and then get back in the fight with aggressive action, right? So I can do it immediately, or I can get some distance and then do it. Just knowing that is really important for me because I can control the fight how I want. And you can also couple that into the neutral dash of reversal. So you can neutral dash aggressive action, and then you can reversal. It's a pretty tight window, but... and then neutral dash again, right? But if you do it too soon, you will get the reversal. So moving on. If you don't have a jar, and I forgot this in my last video, so I want to make sure that with the builds that include a jar, I do want to give alternatives. So if you don't have the jar, that's fine. You would just use your Bandit mask, right? So you can get your full 6-piece, because ideally the 6-piece is really, really strong and you do want it. And the fixed attributes on the helmets are pretty good themselves. If you don't have a jar and you still want to use the 6-piece, it still is very strong. And you know, when you're leveling throughout the game, especially just in regular new game, you're not going to have access to the jar yet. So this is one of the earliest builds that you can farm for. So I really highly recommend that you do, because playing the game with this is really, really nice. So get your 6-piece, right? And then for your jewelry, just the 2-piece isn't as beneficial for the unending tragedy. But what I like to do is use the pilgrim set as my alternative. So the pilgrim set, it coincides really, or synergizes really nicely with the Furious Bandit set, because it's all around potent blows, right? So you can see the fixed attributes. You get potent blow stamina damage and potent blow and charged attack damage increase. And this ring actually rolled really nice. I get potent blow damage and attack damage, so it's pretty nice there. But then the 2-piece gives you a nice 15% potent blow damage. Now, this works with Dragon Slayer too, so don't forget about Dragon Slayer. It also works with Gale. The same thing with the 4-piece Furious Bandit set bonus. So the charged attack, Dragon Slayer and Gale will both give you your fire attributes, and they both count as a potent blow and a charged attack. So just keep that in mind. Other than that, this is my alternative here. Other than that, the last thing I'll go over as far as the build itself, or the gear pieces, is if you don't have the 6-piece yet and you don't really want to farm for it, again, I recommend you farm for it, because minimum you want the 4-piece for charged attack to grant you fire attributes. But if you don't have the last 2 pieces and you don't have the jar, again, usually when you're just starting the game, I really, really recommend going with the Fallen Guardian set to complement. So if I use the Fallen Guardian set, I'm just going to throw on a couple pieces, right? I get my 4 pieces, and the Fallen Guardian set does have a weapon as part of a set. So if you get the weapon for Fallen Guardian, that's fine, but ideally you want the Furious Bandit weapon so you can get Gust Perfection. But you can see here, I get the 4-piece for the charged attack, so I can still grant fire attributes, which I really like there. But then the 2-piece Fallen Guardian gives me fire attack damage, which is great, because it just gives me a nice flat 15, and it can complement my Furious Bandit set pretty well. So put this back on here, and you can also do this if you want. It is good, right, if you use the jar and the Fallen Guardian set hybrid with the Furious Bandit, because enemy flame, so when you inflict flame on your enemy, you get 15% damage increase. That's nice for just all around, right? But I personally really like having the 15% while you're enraged, and then the enemy exhausted damage. So this is kind of a lesser. If you don't have all the pieces, you can mix it with Fallen Guardian, but ideally you do want the full Furious Bandit set, because it is very strong, very strong. Other than that, I will say the one last thing to note here is, I'm going to put this back on. One last thing to note on this is Wind Piercer. So again, Wind Piercer is very, very strong. When you do use Wind Piercer, you accumulate status effects more, but it's very costly, right? When you have it fully upgraded, which you should, it's 3 Fury or 3 Spirit. If you dump all of your Spirit or Fury into Wind Piercer, if you just, mag dump your enemy, they're not just going to catch on fire and die immediately. So you do want to save that Spirit, right? Or that Fury again for Gust, when you can use it when they're exhausted, and to negate damage when you need to if you get in trouble, right? So I know it's going to be tempting to just spam Wind Piercer and light your enemies on fire, but I would advise against, show a little restraint, right? And kind of, use your spirit, use your fury with an intent, right? Don't just blast it with wind pierce and be like, okay, cool, light on fire. Okay, now what do I do now, right? So really that's it there. Oh, actually one last thing I should note. So with status effects, some people may not know, most status effects have 2 tiers, right? Flame and burn for fire, frost and frostbite for cold, electrocution and paralysis, heft and petrification. For the Furious Bandit set, flame and burn. So flame is the first, and I'm glad that they have nice images here because you can see it in the fights. The first status effect that you inflict when you have fire attributes, when you inflict on an enemy, is flame. So flame ignites the enemy and they take damage over time. But if you keep attacking your enemy with fire attributes, they will take burn damage. So burn damage is very, very strong. I know the fights are hardcore and you don't see the health bar, but if you guys are playing expert or any other difficulty, you'll see it just starts melting the enemy. It's very, very strong, but once you inflict burn from flame, it goes away pretty quickly. So it doesn't last forever. It depletes pretty quick, but it is a strong status effect. Other than that, guys, that's all I have for the Furious Bandit set. Hope you enjoy the fights. And again, I got 2 fights for you, one with Reese and one with Gwydo. So thanks again for watching. See you in the next one.